Okay, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. Got my coffee ready. You do
Here.
too. Oh, I like that mug. That's super cute. So our topic today is talking about how to teach our teenagers to fail. This was a topic we did last year that I think a lot of parents really enjoyed. So it was definitely one I wanted to bring back. I think it's also really timely right now. And, because kids are and teenagers, well, all kids, but, we're dealing with specifically with teenagers, they are having to make a lot of choices. And as parents, we have to choose when to let them make a really bad choice. So what do you have to say about this one?
Yeah, I think this is like a really important topic because one thing I always go back to is with my clients is some of the most extreme cases that I've had come from students who have never failed before and then fail. And it's just like complete devastation. And so I think it's super important for them to fail now while they're still kind of under our wing and we're there to support them. So that's kind of why I think it's just super important to do now. So, I think the fact of the matter is that we all want our kids to be successful. And, I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of time in my life with my kids, hand holding and, how beneficial is that versus, allowing them to fail. And I've heard the term like gift of failure. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start out with a couple of questions for all the parents, but, we can both answer as well. And this is by no means meant to make us feel bad about ourselves. Probably answer yes to all of these questions. So I'm going to read them. So the first question.
Answer them right away.
What's that?
You want me to answer them as you ask them?
You totally can. And parents at home can do the same thing. And remember, this is not meant to judge you. And I already went through these and I know that I said yes to all of them. Okay. So the first question is, have you ever dropped something off at school that your kid forgot, whether it's an assignment, a book, or even lunch? Have you ever saved them from a teacher consequence or starving at school?
Yes. But I got to admit, because I work so far away from home, that's probably more I've gotten my parents to do it for me as opposed to me doing it myself because my parents live a block away.
Your parents aren't letting you fail and then you're not letting them fail.
Right. Exactly.
The second one is, have you ever had to get your teenager out of bed, pleading with them to wake up so they are not late for school?
Every day. Yes.
Right. Yes, here too. Have you ever helped your kids scramble to get supplies for a last minute project that maybe they procrastinated on?
Yes.
Yes. Have you ever helped challenge a grade on a kid's report card?
Not on the report card, but certainly on an assignment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. This one I wasn't sure if I've done before. I think I may have, and it's, have you ever intervened with their friendship troubles?
No, not to the point where I'm like calling, like the other friends, like parents, or talking to the friend myself. I have, talked to my kids about it, and try to help them. But I don't think I've intervened in the way the question's asking.
Okay, yeah. And I think if it's like an extreme case, obviously, like that's totally different. But just in general.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that because it happened to me once where a friend of my daughter's mother, and I think they were like in the 6th grade at the time, she sends me this email that they had this disagreement and like, what am I going to do about it? And I'm like, dude, back off, lady. I'm not going to do anything about it. They're 12 years old. They have fights. It's so put me off that I got this email that I'm like, I am never doing that.
That's embarrassing for them, right? Like, no. And this last question is like, do you still wash their clothes?
Well, I don't, because I don't do any of the laundry in my house. My husband does. So, yes. And I'm honestly sitting here thinking about it. I know he washes Nathan's clothes because Nathan's 10.
Yeah.
I think Hannah does her own laundry, but I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I don't actually know if she does her own laundry.
Oh, that's totally okay. And again, this is not to make us feel bad, right? Like, I think all those little things we do, those nurturing things, like really come from that place of love, right? Like for me, I want to protect their feelings. I want to protect their grades. I want to, just as a mom, right? You just kind of want to mother them and make them safe. But like, I think, how could the lessons of those questions that I asked be more impactful? And I think, if you didn't wash your clothes and you have to show up at school and you have dirty clothes or you have nothing to wear, I think that's like a hard lesson to learn. Or if you didn't turn that project in and your grade drops, because mom didn't rescue you at midnight or run to Michael's on the last night, I think that can be really impactful too. And, obviously, unless your kid has like a medical condition, like if they miss their lunch at school, like typically they will remember the next time. And I have this memory in my mind where I went to the outlets right after work one day out in Gilroy, so I had to drive way out there. And I get a phone call from my kid and he's like, Mom, I left my backpack in the car and I have baseball practice. And like, if I don't practice today, like I can't play in the game tomorrow. So I was at Ann Taylor and I had to put everything back. I jump in my car, I drive back, and I was so mad at myself, but I didn't want him to not play because I know how important it is to him. And it kind of threw me off because it was like, I felt like I did the right thing, but in hindsight, like what would have been more impactful for him?
Yeah, but did you yell at him and stuff afterwards?
Oh,
Did he
totally. Like the whole way there.
down? Like, do I like make them suffer because I'm so pissed at them?
I wasn't smiling driving back. I was probably saying things I shouldn't have said, while I'm driving. But it was like, why did I do that? And it was like, because I didn't want him to be sad. He would have been so disappointed. And it's like, I think when I had kids, I wanted them to grow up to be like brave and resilient and in what I think I may have created, or kids who are kind of dependent on me and maybe not so resilient. They haven't had a lot of opportunity to have to problem solve because I kind of do that for them. So I think as a mom and that nurturing nature, like it's kind of counterintuitive to think like, okay, step back, right? Mm-hmm. And this isn't always, but I think in some cases it's like, okay, how are we going to know they're going to be okay when they leave? Like I was thinking about our kids, right? Is she 17 now? 16 or 17?
She's actually turning 17 in a couple weeks.
Okay. So I'm thinking of our 17-year-old and I'm thinking like, let's say in the next 6 months to a year, they move out of the house. What would worry us? If we had no contact with them and they were just going to kind of figure it out on their own, would we have done our job in preparing them to be on their own?
Yeah.
I feel like I think he might figure it out, but he'd probably eat peanut butter and jelly every day and have dirty clothes. And that's my thought, right? That's my worry.
It's really interesting that you putting it that way because last week we had talked about, like the teenagers right now and, how are they handling, being at home and not going to school every day. And the thing about school with teenagers is that, they have a schedule. Like they go to this class at this time and they go and like they're in the classroom and the teacher's telling them, okay, now you have to do this work. And the vast majority of the kids like follow that schedule and do it because that's just what they do. And right now they're really having to learn how to be more self-directed because maybe they've got a list of assignments they have to do and they have to figure out when to do them. They have to choose whether or not they want to do them because, maybe they don't really have to, but they, they're making a choice like, okay, well, this is a better choice for me. Because especially right now where like the decision not to do it is really like, okay, I'm status quo. Like my grade will stay the way it is. But if I do this, then my grade can improve. And so like, I'm having to like talk to my daughter every day. Okay. Like what's your schedule for today? What is the work that you're going to do today? And she's having to choose that for herself. And when like Ukraine, like, she's going to move out in 18 months or so to go to college, like she's going to have to make those decisions, right? When you're in college, Or, you know, even if you don't go to college, you're just going straight to work, or you're going into the military. Maybe the military, they're controlling you a little bit more, but you know, um,
Maybe that's a better option for me.
I know, right? Like, so I think that, you know, they're going to have to learn how to make those choices. And so this is actually, you know, I think all of us are looking for the silver linings, like, you know, like what our world is right now. But maybe it is teaching our teenagers a little bit more responsibility. Um, and that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, when you think about those like lessons you've learned, is there anything that's happened in your life where it was really difficult, you felt like you fell flat and you learned something from it?
Yes. And I'm so glad that you gave me a heads up that you were going to ask me this, because it gave me time to like think of like, okay.
You weren't supposed to tell.
I want people to think that I just had this answer, like just off the top of my head. So, and it was, you know, it was actually about this time of year 2 years ago. I was still at Santa Teresa. I was the associate principal at Santa Teresa.
Mhm.
And the principal job at Evergreen Valley High School came open. And I decided that I was ready to make the jump to being principal and applied for it. And it was the situation that, like, everybody I worked with, all of my friends, like, they were like, you are a shoo-in. You are totally going to get this job. Like, they would be, you know, like, you know, you're the most qualified, you're totally going to get it. And, you know, obviously I did not get it, because I'm not having this conversation with a social worker at Evergreen Valley High School right now. So I didn't get it. And it sucked, because in my mind, like, I just thought I was going to get it. And honestly, like, I look back at it now and it was, you know, kind of foolish of me. Like, you know, this sense of entitlement, like I've like put in my work, I've put in my years as an associate principal. Like, this is now like what's owed to me,
Right,
which
right.
sounds terrible.
No,
Um,
that makes sense.
and I was so disappointed. Um, Especially since, you know, I hadn't necessarily made it a secret. I hadn't at all, that I was applying for it. And so when I didn't get it, everybody knew I didn't get it. And it just, God, it just sucked. Um, and
I mean, that's because you have everyone else's expectations and
Right,
a lot of
exactly. You know, I had, you know, exactly, my coworkers, my friends, my family. You know, I remember my daughter, God, I feel like she was almost more pissed about the whole thing than I was, you know. And I mean, there was, you know, some feminism in there too, because the person who got the job was a man, and, you know, he's a very nice guy. I like him a lot. But,
it
you
all
know,
works out in the long run.
uh,
Yes.
you know, so it really, it hurt. And I had to go through, you know, kind of, you talk about this different stages of grief, you know, and I really, you know, the anger, the denial, and like, just, I went through all of them. And then, so as a result though, you know, I went through my, like, you know, I found out that I didn't get it on a Friday, and that weekend was just, oh my God, I was a mess. And, you know, that next week I was like, okay, well, no, I'm going to like figure out, why didn't I get it? And
Mhm.
so I talked to, you know, the higher ups who were, you know, in the final interview, because I went, you know, I mean, I was, you know, I got really close to getting it. And so, you know, and I got some feedback on, you know, in that final interview, what I how I said things and what I didn't say. And I, you know, and I really kind of took that to heart, in that feedback. And so I think that that was a really important thing I did, where I just didn't like blow it off and be like, well, it's, you know, they didn't pick the right person. Like, you know, they are stupid. I really,
It's easy to do in that moment, just be mad and not accept
yeah,
that feedback.
yeah. And certainly I was mad, but then I had to like really like, okay, no, what am I going to do about this? And then, you know, long story short, a couple months later, or not even a couple months later, it was more like probably 6 weeks later, the Piedmont Hills job opened up. And I was like, okay, I'm going to apply for this. And I really took that feedback I got from, that previous experience of applying for a principal job, and, you know, did better in the interviews, and I addressed things that I hadn't addressed prior. And obviously it worked out because here I am. Um, but it really, like, I like look back, and it worked out the way it was supposed to, and I think a lot of times when there is a failure, um, it can be really, really hurtful. And I think there's different levels of failure, right? Um, you know, like you had the example of like your son forgot his baseball bag. And if so, okay, the consequences would have been, he didn't practice, he didn't play in the game, but that's not like, okay, maybe that one game would have made a difference, but it's probably not going to be, such a huge thing, as opposed to like not getting the job you wanted, or, um, my second example that I was thinking about this morning was like, my first marriage that ended in a divorce, though I don't really want to blame myself for that. So I don't want to call that my but like there's like different levels of failure, and some are easier to get over than others. And I think as a parent, it's the big ones that really hurt. Um, my daughter, I shared frequently throughout the year that my daughter is a wrestler, and had really, really lofty goals this year, where she wanted to qualify for state. And honestly, she's good enough to qualify for state. And she got the flu right before the CCS finals and did terribly and didn't qualify. It was horrible. And she was devastated. And it sucked so bad as a parent. Obviously it sucked like in what she was going through, but having to guide her through that, because what can you say? Like, oh, there'll be next time. Well, maybe there won't. I mean, there's not that many opportunities, especially now. Like I keep thinking about this where, a lot of sports are canceled. I mean, she is a junior. And so it's kind of like, well, she'll have her senior year. Maybe I don't know if she will. And so I think that's, sometimes when you're talking about how to teach your kids to fail, there's the small failures and then there's the really big ones. And I think how you have to handle that as a parent,
Mm-hmm.
Is different. What
Yeah,
do
I
you?
like the way that you talked about the sports, because I'm thinking back of, I think it was sophomore year, my son tried out for basketball. He was super excited about it and didn't make the team. And when he came home so sad, I was so like sad for him to see him experience that now I'm thinking about it, I remember what I said to him. It was more like instead of like encouraging him, like, what could you have done differently? Should you have practiced more? You have to remember that they've been playing longer. I was like, they don't know what they're missing. They don't know you're going to be 6'5" in 2 years, and I was so angry. And I didn't allow him to like take ownership of his part in not making it. Like I totally wanted to like comfort him and sugarcoat it. And it just came up to my mind when you were talking about Hannah right now. And I'm like, that was my instinct, right? To like protect. And how could I have handled that differently, as future failures come up.
And I think that that's totally like our instinct to protect our loved ones. I look back, at how my family and my close friends reacted when I didn't get that evergreen job. And they were totally like, they're stupid. They made the wrong choice. Like, how could they do that? And that was really gratifying and great to hear. It didn't necessarily, I guess it pumped up my ego a little bit, but it like didn't change the situation, but I think if I had like personally had just stayed in that place
Right.
of like, they're stupid, then I wouldn't have made the choices I made. I wouldn't have improved, like thought about, and I probably wouldn't be here right now. Like I had to really like kind of dig myself out of that. And I think that that's, and I think it is those like stages of grief. So like maybe like right after, and maybe it is, because honestly, I look back at that and like, it did help to have my family and friends tell me that they loved me and they thought that I was the best.
Yeah.
Because I had had a huge blow, right? And it did help me to hear that, but I couldn't stay there.
Right. No, because you could have gone either way, right? Like I think in those kind of situations, you can either, be resilient and try again, be persistent, or you could have been like, maybe I'm not principal material. I'm just going to stay in this position, right? Like,
Right. And I think that is another I saw my daughter kind of like falling into that, after she didn't place at CCS, like, well, maybe I'm just not good enough. And I'm like, no, you are. Like, you worked so hard. I have seen you in tournaments. You are good enough. You got sick and were really weak at the worst possible time. I mean, it sucked.
Yeah. Oh, my heart's breaking for her between that and not having a prom.
I
Like, oh my gosh, what a year, right? Definitely memorable.
But I think that honestly, it's interesting because, I feel like school canceling and school closing, in a way, it's kind of helped her get over that grief, like, and put things in perspective because she's definitely in a much better place with it now. Um,
Mhm.
and she's like, she's not like, well, just blowing it off. I mean, she's getting up at 5:30 every morning and working out with her coach via FaceTime. So, she's still like there, but I think her attitude going into this next season is going to be different.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
she's just kind of what she's learned for herself, is like, if I don't get it, I'm going to be okay. Like, she may still want it, but she's like, I'm going to be okay. And I think that that's kind of really important, you know?
And I think what's funny too is I was thinking about like, kids being successful and, being honest, like all kids are different, right? I have 3 boys, they're all teenagers now. And 2 of them, do their schoolwork right away and one of them doesn't. And when I had the first 2, it was like, oh, I'm mom of the year. I'm awesome. My kids are so, blah, blah, blah. Well, then number 3 comes along and there's a lot of different challenges there. And so what it gets me thinking of is, why are we so tied into feeling like my kids' successes are a reflection of my intelligence, of my ability to parent? Oh, did I mute? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, somebody came to visit. and I feel like, it is a reflection of me. And so what I decided to do with my third one during this time of school is allow him to do his own work. I took his, word for it that he was getting things done. And I was like, okay, well, let him try this, and see how it goes. So I just kind of was doing my own thing. Well, then yesterday I get an email and I'm going to read it to you. Very humbling as a mom. I work in education. I'm a social worker. I'm supposed to have it together, right? So I get this email from his art teacher. It says, "Dear Mrs. Gunter, I haven't heard from Gavin at all, and I just want to check and make sure that your family's doing well this time. If you need anything that I can provide, please let me know. I'm posting art choices on Google Classroom every Monday in the hopes that it gives them a fun break from their academic work. I don't want to add to your pressures at this challenging time. I know parents are working and trying hard to educate their kids. I'm just checking in to make sure that you're safe and okay. Again, if there's anything you need from me as a concerned teacher, please don't hesitate to let me know." And I was like, oh my God. Like, it was all about me in that moment. I literally was like, should I lie? Should I say I was sick? Like, what do I do? Like, how do I make her know that I'm not like a horrible mother? And I was like, oh my gosh, why is this about me? Right? Like, why am I so concerned? And I had been so proud of myself for kind of letting go of his work, right? Like, but then it became about, what is she going to think of me? Because I don't care about my kids' education, right? And so I think that's a lot of times we don't let them fail because in essence, it's our failure, right? Yeah, I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
No, I'm not. I think I was just sitting too far back.
Sorry.
So no, I think that, it's so hard sometimes. You know, like especially with their schoolwork,
Yeah.
because you do want to make the excuses. Because honestly, I feel like being in education, like it's almost like kind of like even harder, right? Because like you're in the field, like your kids are supposed to be doing well in school.
I mean, you're the principal, right? Like,
I mean, what do you mean my kids aren't turning their work in? I remember, God, this was so long ago but it was probably like in January, maybe early February. I got this one day, I got emails from both of my kids' teachers. Well, actually, I got an email from my son's 5th grade teacher that he wasn't doing his math. and like what is going on with him with math. And then that same day, I didn't even get an email from my daughter's math teacher. She called me, which is
Oh,
even worse, right? When they call, because then it's like super bad. And I was just like, oh my God, what is wrong with you guys? Why can't you do your math work? I get that your dad and I don't like math. We're not math people, but you
right.
still have to do it. Just do it.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, right? It's like, why
Oh,
is it such a reflection of how I parented or who I am? And I think that's a big myth that, who wants to talk about their kids, failures, right? Like, I don't post on Facebook like, oh, my kid didn't make the team. And it's like, oh, my kid did well on, whatever. Like,
yeah, it's
like,
so funny because oh my God, yeah. I look at my daughter and like her wrestling season, and I would post on Facebook like pictures of her with her medals when she like was on the podium, and I was proud mom. I didn't do that after CCS. I didn't. I'm like, oh God, that makes me feel awful.
your
But
kids report cards with B's and C's and like, they tried so hard this semester. You're like,
right.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, God, we do that and like what kind of pressure does that put on our kids too, right? When we're like always like publicizing and celebrating their successes, but then we never mention or ever discuss the failures.
yeah. And I was kind of thinking about like what creates that resiliency. And I think what you just said is like when we're praising successes and not praising effort, if they fail, then that's it, right? But
Yeah.
if they tried and you really like praise that and like respect that and validate that, then that makes them want to continue to do that, regardless of the outcome, right? Because we're not always going to be successful in what we do. And it's
Yeah.
part of life, right?
We're not. And I think, really like, I think with this whole like teaching your team to fail, I think that that's maybe probably the most important part, is to teach them that failure is going to happen. Like they're not always going to get the grade they want, get the job they want, make the team, or whatever it is that they want. Like it's not always going to work out. And I think a lot of times as parents, we always want to try to save them from that disappointment. But you want to, especially with teenagers, like it's really important that we're, teaching them how to be adults. And when you're an adult, you have to deal with that disappointment, and learning how to not just wallow in it and stay in that and then, like give up and be like, well, I guess that's not for me. Like, no, that's not necessarily the answer.
Yeah. And I
And
think this distance learning, shelter in place, I think is really a perfect opportunity for us. And, my 17-year-old, I always yell at him to leave the house because we're going to be late and this and that. And so I haven't done that during this time. He slept through 3 classes now. And I really had a hard time because when we first started the classes, all the teachers were posting, I had 28 out of 29. And of course his teachers, like I have, 30 out of 31. And I knew that one was mine. Right. And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, okay, I have to think about this as he's learning, right? Because he woke up and was so disappointed and he was like, oh, I'm such a loser. I hate myself, whatever. Well, then the next day I found him on the couch at like 7 a.m. and he's like, I decided to sit up because I knew that I could have the potential to sleep through the class. And it was like, oh, he actually learned from that experience. He's doing better. And
right.
I had to watch it and I had to be embarrassed myself, right? Like,
Yeah. No, totally. Like, I think that having them learn from, those mistakes, especially when they're smaller. I mean, because like him sleeping through the class, really, is that a failure? No, it's a mistake.
yeah.
And learning from it, it could lead to, a failure, and great if they doesn't learn from it, if he keeps sleeping through the class, so I think that that's really like allowing them, and I guess maybe that's the smaller, like we talk about like the smaller things versus the bigger things. And with the smaller things is kind of letting them see the consequences, and letting it like, you don't drop off the homework at school when they left it, and because you let them see the consequences and learn from that, because that's teaching the lesson.
Yeah. And I think it's more about teaching us as parents how to do that, right? Like, how do you measure your success as a parent, right? Like for me during this time, it's like during the shelter in place, I'm like, okay, I'm a good mom if I spend an hour of quality time with them and I make them a homemade dinner. That defines me as a mom. And that's how I kind of gauge how successful I'm being. Well, that is going to have to shift. I think we're going to have to be like more compassionate with ourselves, less blame. And instead of like, does my kid have healthy meals every day and all these things, thinking, am I preparing my kid for later? Am
Right.
I giving him all the tools that he needs, to be successful and independent later? Is he going to be resilient? Is he going to be brave and strong? Or is he always going to be anxious because, I order food for him at a restaurant because he's too anxious to do that? Things like that. Like, I think that's something that I'm going to have to shift in my mind of like, what defines being a successful parent? And I think really at the end of the day, it's preparing us to do the things we have to do.
Yeah.
I'm sure you remember moving out when I don't know how old you were when you moved out. And it's like, all of a sudden I realized I have to buy toilet paper. I have to pay for the lights. I have to do all these things. And so they're going to learn, but really giving them skills to be able to manage when it gets tough, because it's going to get tough. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay, so I had a couple of questions. I'd let parents put in some questions.
Sure.
Um, and so this one is a little bit, I feel like we touched on this, but maybe not really directly, was how to improve the kids' motivation when they fail. So that's kind of like after they fail and they do want to kind of give up and say, well, that's just not for me. Like, how do we improve their motivation so that they don't fall into that, just, I'm not going to try anymore.
And I think that could be a good time to, validate the efforts that they put in and how hard that was. And, it's a hard realization to realize that maybe you're not the best at something. But I think encouraging them to continue to try new things, maybe that one specific thing wasn't their forte or whatever, but I think just really praising that effort that they did it. And, yeah, I mean, that's all I can really think.
Yeah, I think it's depending, to me it's like kind of depends on like what was the situation and how big was the failure.
Yes.
And I think you maybe handle it in different ways. Was it like, with Hannah, where she had this huge goal and she didn't get it at all? I think I had to learn, like, let her grieve for that, and like totally yeah, and like we'd grieve together, like, yes, this sucks, like this is awful, I was really trying not to jump right into like how this is how we're going to fix it. I had to let her like be really sad, because it was really sad, you know and I think kind of the same thing, right? Maybe what, I think sometimes we have to look at like acknowledge what the kid's seeing as a major disappointment and failure. I mean, that word failure is a little, weird in the situation, but maybe they, broke up with a boyfriend or girlfriend and they're really sad about it. And, I think the worst thing we can do is, right away be like, oh, get over it. That person wasn't good for you. Like, let them be sad. And then like, you have to kind of, but you can't let them stay there in the sadness. Right.
And I think, like you mentioned, the stages of grief in any failure, failing a class. I mean, really, it's the loss of something that was important to you. And I think it's, they might be angry about it, and then they might, and eventually they start to accept that. And then I think it's easier to see kind of the silver linings and things like that later on. So knowing that, like, maybe in that moment right after that failure, they're like not interested in doing anything. And that might be that time, like you said, of grief and, loss and disappointment, and allowing them to be there. Maybe, not letting them stay there, but everybody's process is different. Some people might kind of linger there a little bit longer, but really, praising what they've accomplished and trying to find the, the good things. Even when I have kids come in with breakups and things like that, it's like, what did you learn in that relationship? How is that going to benefit you later? Because that's not a fail. It was, you tried it, you did what you thought was the right thing to do at the time. What did you learn? What can you take to your next relationship? And it does take time, and that could be months process for something like that. So just giving him that time.
I think, I when I had sent something out to the students right when school shut down. I think I sent it to the parents too, about the different stages of grief, and dealing with the school closing. And like, I mean, it's a little bit. I don't think we could consider that a failure on the kids' part, but it is a major disappointment. And I think that that's kind of like really, maybe we should call this like teaching our kids how to like cope with disappointment, right? Because the end of the school year just abruptly starting. None of them realized that March 13th was their last day of school that year. Like, none of us did. And, I think we had some inkling that, some things probably were going to be, completely canceled, like Fantastics, like, we knew that, but I don't think that we realized that, prom's not going to happen, and, what's going to happen with graduation. Like, I don't think that any of us really realized. And so, like, kind of as this is all unfolded, that disappointment, and like having those stages of grief, I think it is like, I think we are all going through that.
Yeah. I mean, watching my kids find out that baseball, wasn't going to happen this year. I mean, this was the first time he was being social and getting out there. And I think, it's helped him put things in perspective. Like, okay, that was bad, but next year I'm going to try again. And, stuff happens. And this is a really strange opportunity where kids are being disappointed and then persevering, continuing and showing up at school. And, it's a strange time for everybody.
For sure. For sure. So, hey, I shared my big failure. Did you share yours? I thought you had one too.
I have plenty. I'm trying to find one that I could share with everyone, but I think for me it was, I finished high school. I went to college for 6 weeks and I dropped out. And my mom used to tell me, like, suffer for 4 years or suffer forever. And it just wasn't my thing at the time. So I didn't actually finish college until I was 34 years old. And when I went back to school, I had 3 really little kids and they were all under 5. And it was terrible. I mean, it was horrible. And I learned a lot about myself, like how strong I was, that I think that was probably one of the biggest disappointments of my life. In hindsight, it gave me years with my kids that I could never get back. I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. And gosh, when I think about it, like even to this day, I'm like, I can't believe I graduated from college. I didn't even want to go. Like, so I think for me, that was my failure. And now it's like, I feel so good about what I did.
Isn't that interesting? Like, what could be considered like your biggest failure, like you dropped out of college, but then later you went and finished college. It's like your biggest failure turns into your biggest success. I would say that, to me too. Yeah, I didn't get that Evergreen job, but I got the Piedmont Hills job, and I think I'm doing good. I love my job. I do. I'm absolutely in the perfect place. And so I think that, maybe that's a great way to finish up is, when you talk to your kids about this, and they may not be able to hear it right away. And I think that that's kind of like looking and paying attention to where they are in that grief, that they could turn that failure around to be their biggest success and really learn from it. And, have that be something that they end up being super proud of.
Right. It's like, if you could see the future, it'd make things a lot easier. I didn't know it would be my big success in the long run, but
right.
So before we started recording, I was on Amazon, and a lot of the research I did comes from a woman by the name of Jessica LaHaye, I think, and she wrote a book called The Gift of Failure. So your copy is going to the office at school.
Oh,
now we have the book club, so give us something to do.
All right. So The Gift of Failure. Okay.
The Gift of Failure. So hopefully.
That would be awesome. Thank you. So maybe some parents will read it too. And then we can, next year, maybe when we actually can come back together, we can have a little bit of a book club. That would be kind of cool. So.
Or we could Zoom it.
Exactly. I definitely, like, now that I've learned how to post videos to YouTube, which last week, trying to post our video to YouTube was a little bit of an ordeal, but then once I figured it out, I'm like, it was super easy. So it definitely made me think like, oh, maybe we could always be recording our parent coffees and sharing them out. Because I know a lot of parents always want to come, but they have to work and they can't
Right.
do it. So maybe that's a way to
Yeah.
share out what we're doing.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording, but have a good week. And
You
all the
too.
parents have a good week too.
Yes. Enjoy.